before by interviews. For example, in the past, we've published some surveys, and we recently conducted a survey, and we're in the process of disseminating that. Again, so when we think about our activities, we think about education and training, such as this, infrastructure and communication, such as surveys. We also have a call out that we have a slide for, and also some collaborative research. For example, we just published an article on, for those of you interested in nitrosamines, one CMC approach is to add antioxidants perhaps. And so there was a recent publication about the risks, biopharmaceutical risks associated with adding them, which were actually zero in terms of affecting drug permeability. So thanks for all the companies that we've interacted with, and thanks for your input. We do collate those and in an anonymous way do provide feedback to the FDA about priorities that you see, which does impact even the selection of, for example, workshops. So just a little bit about model master files. I know the FDA has participated in a few workshops before on this. Obviously, this is a rather detailed workshop over 2 days. For CRCG, we did have one in October of 2022. And for all of our workshops, you can go to complexgenerics.org and go back and see all the recordings and all of the handouts, for example. So if you go to Symposium 2 on model sharing, acceptance, and communication with FDA, there's some relevance to this meeting there, although obviously this meeting is much more detailed. And just a little bit about drug master files. I know there's a lot of people online, including in India, so I know they need to head home or go to bed soon. So just one comment is, and these are available in the room, hard copy. There's an operational facts of master files available on the website. So as you may know, drug master files are submissions to the FDA that are confidential and provide rather detailed specifications and other things with regard to drug substance or excipient or packaging product. And you can even go to the FDA website and see all the list of the drug master files that are available, such as methotrexate, a drug substance, and propyl gallate, an excipient. And I think this will be elaborated on quite a bit over the next 2 days, but what are some of the aspects of drug master files in that they represent maybe a framework for model master files. They're submitted solely at the discretion of the holder. For example, the person that manufactures a drug substance or the excipient. Only the FDA and the drug master file have access to its proprietary content. The DMF holder can authorize someone else, for example, a ANDA applicant, to be able to reference that in their ANDA application, for example. And if there's a deficiency with the drug master file, that will be directed to those communications will be directed to the holder of that drug master file. So we've had a couple workshops this spring. We look forward to having a few more workshops in the fall. Our next one is in October on immunogenicity risk associated with peptides and oligos. In November, we have another one on nitrosamines, both CMC issues as well as pharm tox type of issues. And in December, we have one on low global warming potential propellants. And those will all be held here in person at this facility as well as online. We do have a call for data to help out Simulations Plus receive the grant from the FDA in the area of physiologic-based pharmacokinetic modeling. The scope of that grant has to do with developing such models and validating them, developing workflows, and even do virtual bioequivalence studies. So anyone who's interested in maybe contributing data to this, more than welcome to do that, and that's, you can respond by going to the Complex Generics website. So here's the CRCG team. Anna Schwendeman at Michigan is a co-director. She unfortunately couldn't be here. Visha is here, Jen is here, and as always, Dana is readily online. So much thanks for the team. Again, I would encourage you to sign up for our website. Sign up for emails. We probably send out an email once a month, maybe a little bit more. We try not to do too much, but do try to keep you up to date. So thanks for your participation. Sam Rainey is our program officer at the FDA. Much thanks for Sam. Also Dr. Lionberger and Dr. Murphy for encouraging all of us to have access to OGD scientists. And before I introduce Dr. Murphy, let me introduce Lucy and Fang. I think many of you know, if you're interested in modeling and generic products, I think you're probably familiar with Lucy. Lucy is the Deputy Director of the Division of Quantitative Methods and Modeling in OGD. She's very fond of clinical pharmacology, clinical pharmacology. She's also the chair of an FDA work group on partial AUC. So much thanks, Lucy and Eleftheria, for really being co-chairs of this meeting. And she'll give some workshop overview very shortly. But immediately, we do have FDA opening remarks from Dr. Murphy. Dr. Murphy is the director of OGD. She's been in FDA since 2007. She started off in new drugs, went to Center for Tobacco Products, and then several years ago came to OGD with a focus on, she's a pediatrician with a focus on clinical and regulatory affairs. Dr. Murphy, thanks for being here.
Good morning, everybody. I'm glad to see a full room here. Thank you, Dr. Polli, for your warm introduction, and welcome everyone to the FDA and CRCG co-hosted workshop on model master files. You may know that CDER recently announced the formation of a Center for Excellence on Quantitative Medicine, and creation of this new center signifies the importance of modeling and simulation tools across all aspects of drug development regulated by CDER. And we do anticipate that both product development by the industry and product assessment by the FDA will see more use of modeling and simulation approaches. This is going to be true for both brand drugs and generic drugs. Modeling and simulation approaches can be especially valuable for the generic industry. There's data from existing approved products that can be used to test a model and support movement towards optimally efficient bioequivalence approaches. As model predictions become more reliable, then we can have less reliance on in vivo bioequivalence studies, which can be very expensive. To encourage more widespread use of models in generic drug applications, we want to develop a system that allows models to be reused and both reduces duplicative model development and model regulatory assessment. A model master file can allow models to be used in multiple applications with a common FDA review. I'm excited to be here today as this workshop underscores our FDA commitment to adopting new methodologies through model master files, which have the potential to significantly streamline drug development, facilitate innovation, and foster regulatory advancement. The model master file is a framework aimed at model sharing and model reusability. Similar to drug master files, as Dr. Polli mentioned, model master files can be referenced by multiple applications, thus improving model sharing, model standardization, and regulatory consistency and efficiency. Quantitative models may be developed as model master files, such as physiologically based PK models, population PK models, and mechanistic in vitro and in vivo correlations. Discussions like the ones we'll be having today are essential to help develop practical aspects and best practices for model master files that are included in regulatory submissions with modeling and simulation approaches. One of the goals of this workshop is to illustrate how model master files can improve the efficiency with which evidence from modeling and simulation can facilitate drug development. And additionally, the workshop will explore how modeling and simulation can increase efficiency and application assessment and consistency. Since its enactment in 2012, GDUFA has played an important role in supporting the development of generic drugs, including complex generic drugs. Innovation in model master file can help make review more efficient by proactively addressing emerging scientific and regulatory issues. One way to address some of these issues from a regulatory perspective is inviting more collaboration among the diverse group of stakeholders represented here today, from those of you in academia to those of you representing both generic and new drug industries. Allowing space for all interested parties to coordinate and collaborate towards the implementation of model integrated evidence helps to increase efficiency in drug product development overall and to streamline drug product approval. Ultimately, ensuring that patients have greater access to safe, effective and quality medicines is the public health priority for us in FDA. Supporting innovation in pharmaceutical development contributes to the expanded access to medicines for patients and consumers and is the root of what brings us all together. And so thank you to everyone who's worked hard to make this workshop possible, especially those folks in FDA as well as in CRCG Planning Committee for putting this event together. I hope that the productive and informative interactions help improve understanding of the role of model master files in supporting drug product development. And as you noted, we have many exciting scientific workshops coming up, so we hope to see you again very soon. Thank you so much and have a really good day.
Good morning, everyone. It's so happy to see so many friends in the audience. So I really hope you find the opening remarks as insightful as I did. I want to extend my sincere thanks to Dr. Murphy for setting the tone that promises to be a fruitful and engaging workshop. Now, as we move forward, let me provide you a brief overview of what you can expect from today's sessions. Our workshop has been developed to dive deep into the scope and regulatory application of a model master file. We aim to explore the different aspects of the model master file and really foster a meaningful discussions that not only broaden our understanding, but also spark some innovative ideas. Throughout the day, we have organized a series of sessions that are designed to cover the key aspects of the model master file. For session 1, we'll provide a comprehensive and detailed description of the model master file framework, discuss the considerations, opportunities, and challenges with implementing the model master file. And we really want to highlight how the model master file can facilitate the integration of the modeling and simulation approaches into the drug development and regulatory assessment. Session 2 and Session 3 will focus on model master file applications that can support the product development and regulatory submissions for the oral drug products and long-acting injectable drug products, respectively. Today's last session, Session 4, will be small group discussions where we strongly encourage the active participation. We want you to share your thoughts and experience so we can together make the most out of this opportunity to learn and grow together. Without further delay, I would like to welcome our keynote speakers. I'm sure they do not need any introduction. I will be quick. Dr. Peck, who is adjunct professor of UCSF, also co-founder and expert consultant from NDA Partners ProPharm. And the title of his talk will be Evolution of Pharmacometrics in Drug Development and Regulation. And following Dr. Peck, Dr. Robert Lionberger, who is our director of the Office of Research and Standards, OGD FDA, and Dr. Robert Lionberger will deliver the talk entitled Clearing the Path for Modeling and Simulation in Drug Applications. Thank you again for being here today, and we are so happy to see you. And let's make today's workshop a great experience for all. Thank you. Dr. Peck.
So thank you very much. I'm very grateful to be here and thankful for the invitation. Now, if I can have the first slide, please. I didn't, there we go. As you can imagine, explaining the evolution of pharmacometrics in 15 minutes is a tall order. So let's first start. How do I advance the slide? I've hit the right and left click. I've moved the cursor button, and is that what this thing is? Okay, great, thank you. So let's start with a definition of pharmacometrics. I'm sure all of you have an idea what this is. Pharmaco, drugs, metrics, measuring. And in drug development and regulation, I think you would know that. So the underlying science involves models and pharmacostatistical methods. And the anticipation of outcome from employment of these is efficient drug development, sound regulatory decisions, and therapeutic decisions for patients. The underlying science of this involves the capture of exposure response variability, employs the concepts and techniques involved in pharmacology, pathophysiology, genetics, and disease progress. We capture that in the concepts of pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics, coupling those, disease progression, and importantly, adherence, how patients don't take their drugs. And finally, and I introduced this as an element of pharmacometrics that may not be familiar to all, but hypothesis testing that we borrow from biostatistics is a very important element of pharmacometrics. We use that in determining the eligibility of generic drugs for regulatory approval using the two one-sided t-tests, and now there's work underway that Liang and I and others in FDA are evaluating of Bayesian methods. So I think we should be mindful that we stand on the shoulder of giants, and there are so many giants on whose shoulders we stand in pharmacometrics. It would be far too ambitious to name them all, including those that are in the audience. But it was Newton who said that if I've seen further, it is by standing on the shoulder of giants. And he was referring to Kepler and Galileo as having set the foundations of mathematics and astronomy for his advances in optics and motion and calculus. I'm blanking suddenly. Einstein, how can I forget Einstein? Einstein made the same comment, although he didn't say if. He said, I do stand on the shoulders of giants, and he was referring to Maxwell and Newton himself. So we stand on the shoulders of giants, and it can go a long ways back. The boundaries of metrics in drug were set at least as far back as Hippocrates, and we don't know whose shoulders he stood on, but he basically said, look, don't give too much. You may do harm, so just don't do that. And that was followed then 1,000 years later by Paracelsus in Switzerland, who basically said all drugs are poison. It's just a matter of getting the dose right, that they're not overly poisonous and beneficial to patients. So I see several major advancements in modern pharmacometrics that I'd like to list here. First of all, we have models. These are mathematical models. Pharmacokinetic, pharmacodynamic, systems and statistical. In the middle of the last century, Scheiner and Beal introduced the concepts of population pharmacokinetics that capture the demographics and individual differences that reflect variability, and pharmacokinetics and eventually pharmacodynamics. Interestingly, as you'll see in a moment, the original motivation was for patient care, was for getting the dose right in individual patients. This was greatly accelerated 30, 40 years ago by the introduction of high-speed laptop and handheld computers that permit very complex calculations to be done in rapid sequence. Very importantly, regulatory receptivity and encouragement of the use of pharmacometric methods has been a major and I think crucial boost to the gaining of traction in the industry and at FDA. And finally, we have on the horizon artificial intelligence and machine learning Rob asked me a question while we were waiting, what's your vision? And I said, that's my question to you. I'm hoping we'll learn more about that in the talks to come. So if we want to advise, identify at least one pair of shoulders on whom we stand, I'm going to cite Lou Shiner and his biostatistical companion, Stuart Beal. In 1972, they published a paper that outlined the basis for population PK and for its employment in a Bayesian framework for individuating patient pharmacokinetics. What ensued from that during the next 15 years or so was a creep into the regulatory framework. I always recognized bioavailability, the idea of bioavailability as a crucial step in the evolution of computational pharmacokinetics and regulatory awareness. When I practiced medicine in the late 1960s, early 1970s, when we wanted to give digoxin to a patient who had heart failure, we couldn't rely on the available therapies, drugs, because the bioavailability ranged from 10% to 90%. So we were taking a real risk. FDA picked up on that and developed regulations and procedures for identifying and controlling bioavailability in marketed products. Bob Temple essentially initiated an awareness of dose and response, picking up on Paracelsus, I think, and even referenced the potential for a pharmacokinetic screen in phase 3 to capture outliers. This was embedded in guidance then later on. The early 1990s saw an intensification of awareness of various sources of variability, drug metabolism, drug-drug interactions. Exposure response modeling became encouraged by FDA. The first instance of PBK in a regulatory application and review occurred in the mid-1990s to a product that you may only be aware of in the history books now. That would be Retin A, a retinoid that was used widely for crow's feet and for acne, but which is extremely teratogenic and systemically available when one is giving it topically. And so without the ability to actually investigate this in humans and very poorly in animals, FDA encouraged the sponsor to undertake a physiologically based modeling exercise to determine the potential exposure to a developing fetus. And on that basis, the product was eventually released. We saw the first simulation of a clinical trial that was used for registration. Syntex was developing its mycophenolate mofetil for the treatment of inflammatory diseases, and employed that in a design and analysis of its registration trial. What was lacking in the 1980s was a framework for complete incorporation of modeling and simulation, pharmacometrics in drug development. So in the early 1990s, we held a meeting in Arlington and put together our heads and imagined how we could get sponsors to do PK studies in animals, which was uncommon at that time and uncommonly used for dose identification in humans, and put together this graphic which basically said, look, you should do it in every phase, non-clinical, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, and inform FDA and sponsors and the users eventually how to individualize patients' dosages based upon pharmacometric methods. That followed another decade of intensive administrative and encouragement actions at FDA. with the development of the Clinical Pharmacology Advisory Committee, the Division of an Office of Clinical Pharmacology, question-based review, end of phase 2A meeting. All of these were actions that referenced or reflected FDA's acceptance and encouragement for the employment of these methods in drug development, and eventually then the Division of Pharmacometrics in 2008. What we called concentration targeted or concentration-oriented drug development in the early 1990s began to be captured in a comprehensive fashion in the rubric of model-informed drug development. I borrowed this slide from a ROSA webinar that essentially captures 20 years of the evolution of the model-informed drug development concept and includes some of the incremental steps that I mentioned a while ago. So actually, it's daunting how aggressive and pleasing to me that the FDA has embraced this and advanced. And what we see here are a number of programs and initiatives within FDA. The Fit for Purpose tool, which encouraged the development of disease progress models, the MIDD and the Complex Innovative Designs initiatives, the Model Master File, which we're talking about in the next few days, Model Integrated Evidence, basically an add-on concept to MIDD. And then recently, artificial intelligence. The framework paper is really, I would say, optimistic and stimulating. But what was interesting is the April 2024, that's a month that started and that ended yesterday. The April issue of Clinical Pharmacology and Therapeutics is an entire issue on the potential applications of AI and machine learning in clinical pharmacology. I urge you all to scan that, if not read it, and use that as a historical point of departure from which we will see additional advances in pharmacometrics. So now just a week ago, FDA did even better with the announcement of the Quantitative Medicine Center of Excellence, which I think attempts to bring all of this together into a organized framework and will foster the comprehensive integration of quantitative methods in drug development and regulations. I'm going to end with a couple of cartoons that I thought were interesting. I borrowed this from Stella, who has a screen capture from the talk she gave last week. And what I take from this is the potential for the destruction of silo thinking and the integration that pharmacometrics and modeling and quantitative approaches, including biostatistical, that can bring to our culture, to our community, to make our advancements even more efficient. And finally, I remind you of Eng's law, which is the easier it is to do, the harder it is to change. And this just shows the evolution of human intelligence thinking. We start with Homo a priorius, which were primates who had an idea but no explanation. Homo pragmaticus saw the data but couldn't explain it. Homo frequentis had plenty of data but only one explanation. Finally, Homo sapiens, now we have tons of data and too many explanations. And I think the next stage is a more comprehensive incorporation of Bayesian thinking, which includes the probability of explanation according to all available data. So with that was history of pharmacometrics in 16 or 17 minutes, and now it's up to Rob.
Thank you, Carl, for joining us here today and providing your historical view of all of the evolution of the use of modeling and simulation in drug development, and especially your role in facilitating that through FDA, and then your support of those activities, after you've left FDA. I'm sure all of the people who are here from working in that field recognize that your consistent advocacy over these past 30 years for that activity has been really important to its acceptance at FDA, and so we really appreciate that. And so it's my pleasure to be here to give some perspective on why we're here, what we're trying to do. And I would express that as we're trying to clear the path for modeling and simulation in drug applications. And so I want to say that hopefully everyone here believes that modeling and simulation makes drug product development and regulatory assessment more efficient, that these are improvements that are good to use from both us as FDA, right? We shouldn't just look at your PK study, we should analyze the data, right? When you're developing a drug product, you shouldn't guess which formulation is going to be bioequivalent. You should have some prediction and then confirmation in the bioequivalence study. And, the reason why this is important is that for all things going on at CDER related to this, and you heard both Iilun and Carl mention the Center for Excellence in Quantitative Medicine, which covers sort of all the things that CDER does, it's really, how I would express it, is patient access to both innovative and affordable medicine. And whether you use modeling and simulation to help the development of a new therapeutic, or help provide efficient access to competition and access to multiple suppliers that reduce drug shortages, make products affordable and reliable. All of those are part of the goal of CDER and FDA in terms of access to effective and appropriate pharmaceutical products. And so with this perspective, we want to, and this is, I'll talk a little bit about why we in OGD have really been pushing this forward, is, we're looking forward to a future where it's more common for applications to FDA to include modeling and simulation approaches. And what does that mean, and how do we do that effectively and, without causing regulatory barriers, but making it much more efficient? And this is not just limited to the model master files, but it is the direction. And we look at what's going to be happening in the future. This is what the future is. People at FDA have heard me, I like to quote, the comment, right, software is eating the world, right? This is sort of Silicon Valley thinking from 20 years ago, but it is the idea that there's huge amounts of value that are created by analyzing data and making predictions about that. And that's going to be part of our, drug development and drug evaluation. And so and I think here we have lots of introductions, and I think you've seen highlights of this mentioned by both, Lucy and Jim and Iilun's talk as well. What are some of the advantages of having a model master file? And why is this part of a framework that says, how do we prepare and evolve our regulatory system for more extensive use of models and simulation in drug evaluation? So again, some things are reusability, right? And this is something that may not be front of mind if you're developing and reviewing new drug products, but if you're thinking about generic drug program, a blockbuster drug sometimes gets 20 to 30 drug applications for the same product. And if modeling and simulation is important for those developments, right, it's not really efficient for 30 generic companies who are trying to provide affordable medicines to duplicate work and model development, even if it's effective. And it's not efficient also for FDA reviewers to say, well, I have 30 applications, each one has their own model in this, and I have to evaluate all 30 of those to make sure that they're appropriate. So there's opportunities as you think about using this at scale, and especially in the generic program, we'd want to say, wait a second, are there ways we can identify places where things can be done once, developed once, reviewed once, right, and then relied upon in a way that does this. And this gets to the scalability, right? And that's especially a consideration for a generic drug program where we want the scale of the program to be thousands of drug applications a year, right? Compared to 100 new drug applications a year that come in. And so you're at a 10x scale, you have to have more thought about efficiency and removing duplication. And that's why we've really moved, tried to push forward this initiative here. Thinking about this is part of the essential future in that area. And I also think that the model master file can really help support what I call an ecosystem for model development. So those of you in the generic industry, imagine if in the generic industry, every time you wanted to market a product, you had to include in your application and develop yourself the drugs, the chemistry and synthesis of the drug substance, right? You're not able to go into the market and purchase API and then develop a product. Everything has to be included in your application and done by you, right? So that's this sort of vertically integrated model, right, which can work at, that doesn't really work at scale, right? There's huge advantages to the development of generic products when you can go purchase APIs and not have to then incorporate them into your organization, even into your application. And I think the idea of this is that for more widespread use of modeling applications, modeling are not just for applicants with in-house expertise. The idea of a rational economic system around this allows specialization, allows people who are developing products to bring in expertise, but include that in their application submission in a way that protects the intellectual property and effort and ensures that if you're developing useful models, there's ways for that to be sort of rewarded and reused in the economic system if they create value. And so it's trying to bring that. I think that's sort of a long-term value of thinking about how the environment works. And this is not something FDA controls, it's not something we can mandate, but it's something that we want to have a system that allows sort of creativity and innovation to be rewarded. And that's one of the things that lies behind the vision of the model master file. And again, consistency as well. Again, I think we've seen through the development of drug master files, internally FDA moved from a model where you sent in a drug master file and it just went to a drug product reviewer 20 years ago and different people reviewed them. As part of the evolution of our pharmaceutical quality system, we developed specialized groups that review the drug master files consistently and efficiently. And again, this is something that having models in a model master file framework. And you'll hear today about what type of information should be included, a standardized format. These things can also help make the review and assessment of these more efficient for FDA. And again, this gets to the question, if you want to do this for a generic drug program that has 1,000 applications, you have to operate at a scale and be efficient and be focused on that. And again, the fifth aspect of this I think is really valuable, going forward, is that, we at FDA do want to support innovative approaches. But I think at least I also recognize that a lot of the decisions that potential applicants make about innovative approaches is there some, what I would sort of say is called regulatory risk, right? If I do something new, is FDA going to ask me more questions about this? Are they going to delay the approval of my application because I'm the first person to do this, right? Shouldn't I just do the standard thing? Shouldn't I just do what FDA has always recommended? Isn't that, even though it might be less efficient, isn't that more certain? And isn't that, and I think it's a rational, from the perspective of a company, that's a rational decision. I should choose the more certain, less efficient path just because I want to minimize the regulatory risk. And so if at FDA we want to encourage, we talk a lot about encouraging innovation, but how do we make sure that we can provide venues that minimize that regulatory risk? And the model master file can be one of those ways. For example, like if you know that FDA has already reviewed a model master file for some aspect of the modeling approach, then you have less risk that that's going to cause problems. And as the system gets established, there's a lot of opportunities for increasing the confidence that modeling and simulation approaches will be accepted, because they're built on a sort of reliable foundation. And certainly there's other things that we do to try to support innovative approaches through different meeting processes and things like that as well. But this is something, again, the model master file can help establish that. To say, if you know that there's been a model master file that's been used in another application, there's much higher confidence that that will be acceptable in your application. And again, a lot of these things are driven by the scale of the program. Thinking about the generic drug program as something that deals with 10 times the number of applications as a new drug program gives you a perspective on why we're interested in this. The other aspect of the use of modeling and simulation in generic drug development is that it ought to be more valuable in generic drug development because there's always a foundation there. Every generic product that someone's submitting, that's based on a product that's already been approved, that's already gone through clinical trials, that's been used, there's data about it, either through the publications around the product, the drug, there's information available. It's not a untestable prediction. There's all of the studies that supported the approval of the new product. And so the models that are used in generic drug development can be based on that. It's never going to be I'm interested in this molecule and I want to know what it does in humans and it's never been given to humans before, right? You're not in that context in generic drug development. There's always some things that are known about that product. And I think this can be very valuable to the generic industry to leverage that as they're developing products, as they're managing risk. And again, the idea that to provide affordable medicines, you have to have efficient development programs and efficient review programs. And I mentioned this as well, generic drugs sometimes have multiple submissions. And we want to be, again, to operate a professional regulatory program, we also want to be consistent across these. And we want to evaluate modeling and simulation approaches similarly for all applicants. Right, and so this is something that can also be facilitated by model master file approaches. If you submit a model master file approach, then we review that in a consistent way, whether it's cited in a generic drug application, a new drug application. Again, there's some overlap. There's a set of new drug applications that are B2 applications that are building on the safety and efficacy of an approved product. They're maybe not doing direct bioequivalence, but they're bridging to that data. They're relying on that data. There are many NDAs that are approved without new clinical studies because there's a pharmacokinetic bridge. Some modified release products, different dosage forms. The same type of modeling approaches that you would use in generic drug development can also be reused in that context. And again, one of the goals is to encourage innovation by lowering the risk. And so some of the other things that we can do in addition to the model master file are encourage, if you're using innovative modeling approaches, we have sets of meetings for people to use for the model integrated evidence pilot and for the, as well the model master files, as well as our normal pre-ANDA meetings. So there's lots of opportunities to discuss innovative approaches in the generic drug program as well. So again, all of these things we want fit together in an integrated approach where we want to reduce some of the barriers to innovation. And so with that, today, I hope you'll get, we'll really dig deeply into the model master file concept. And I think also at this workshop, you're going to hear about a lot of the examples of where modeling and simulation is really helpful in drug development and drug evaluation. So you'll see, I hope you'll get not just a sense about the logistics of the model master file, but the sort of specific applications that we've seen where modeling can be really useful in the generic drug evaluation and review. And hopefully this will then encourage how we say, well, that's something that more and more applicants should use, and the model master file will really help enable that access. And again, please keep in mind the major role of this is the goal of the modeling and simulation is to really have efficient drug development and assessment processes leading toward patient access. And I think that's, in the end, why we're here, in the end, why we want to develop these models and use them as much as possible. So with that, thank you all, and look forward to engaging with you over the next few days at this fantastic workshop.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Eleftheria Tsakalozou. I'm an assessor and acting team lead at the Division of Quantitative Methods and Modeling at the Office of Research and Standards, the Office of Generic Drugs at the FDA. I'm honored to welcome you to the first session of our workshop today. This session will focus on defining the model master file framework and understanding considerations that may relate to model sharing, model acceptance, and model communication. The session is composed of 4 talks, followed by a 30-minute panel discussion. I would like to ask you to hold off on your questions until all speakers have finished with their talks, and we will move on to the panel discussion. At that point, you can use any of the microphones in the room to share your question. And now we'll move on towards introducing our speakers. Our first speaker is Dr. Liang Zhao. He's Director of the Division of Quantitative Methods and Modeling at ORS at OGD. He will discuss the development and framework of model master file within the regulatory space. Dr. Erin Skoda is a supervisory chemist from the Office of Pharmaceutical Quality at the FDA. She is our second speaker, and with her talk, she will improve our understanding of the model master file framework by drawing parallels between the model master file and the drug master file. Dr. Tim Nicholas is the head of technology and innovation in the Pharmacometrics and Systems Pharmacology Group in Pfizer. He will present next on how the model development lifecycle and model applications in clinical development could become intertwined with the MMF framework. The final talk for this session will be delivered by Dr. Kollipara, who is leading the biopharmaceutics group at Dr. Reddy's Laboratories. Dr. Kollipara will be discussing challenges, opportunities, as well as case examples of model master file in generic drug product development. The 4 talks will be followed by a panel discussion where our speakers will be joined by Dr. Stella Grosser, Director of DB8, Office of Biostatistics, Dr. Pankwa Rege, Director of DPQA6, OPQA1 at the Office of Pharmaceutical Quality at the FDA, Dr. Partha Roy, Director of the Office of Bioequivalence at the Office of Generic Drugs at the FDA, Dr. Flora Musuamba, who is a professor at the University of Namur and also serves as a pharmacometrics and pharmacovigilance internal expert at the Belgian Federal Medicines Agency within the EMA. Our last panelist is Dr. Hao Zhu, who is the Director of the Division of Pharmacometrics at the Office of Clinical Pharmacology at the FDA. The panel discussion will be moderated by Dr. Lucy Fang, Deputy Director at the Division of Quantitative Methods and Modeling at the Office of Research and Standards at OGD, and Dr. Erin, who is currently serving as the Deputy Director of the Division of Bioequivalence 3, Office of Bioequivalence at the Office of Generic Drugs. Looking forward to an engaging discussion. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Liang Zhao to the podium.
So getting there. Good morning, everyone. Colleagues, friends, and fellow modelers, it's a really great pleasure for me to kick off the technical scientific part of today's program. So my name is Liang. So also before my presentation, I want to show my thanks to all of you, and thanks to Dr. Peck to review the history of the modeling simulation impact in drug development, and Dr. Lionberger in sharing the advantages and the regulatory insight of using model master file. I think my message basically is that the time is ready for us to make the model more visible, more impact-making, shareable, and shareable, more standardized in the whole drug development program through the venue of model master file. So this is the standard disclaimer, but we are, soon you will see, we are going to make the model master file initiative operational in the regulatory setting. As we have been witnessing, the modeling simulation has a growing impact in modern drug development. From the new drug side, we have a MIDD. Is becoming an integral part of new drug development for almost all NME, NDAs, and BLAs. So in PDUFA 6, MIDD parallel meeting pilot has been kicked off. In PDUFA 7, is becoming officially part of the User Fee Act. So for generics, with the cumulative knowledge and information gained through the new drug development stage and the post-marketing, I think the impact of modeling is even bigger. So can we use model-generated information as evidentiary information for drug approval? Consequently, we raise up the concept of model-integrated evidence. The concept can cover all challenging areas for generic drug development, especially for complex generics. In fact, the MIE industry meeting pilot has been launched on October 1st, 2023. As Dr. Peck mentioned, nicely laid out, now we are also facing a new horizon, like a quantitative systems pharmacology, see CJ there, and also AI machine learning. It's becoming an inevitable playground or battleground for every discipline. So we are facing new modalities of models. With this kind of a chaotic situation, I'm quote unquote, I will say we need a more organized, more standardized, officialized approach in handling modeling component in the application. They can way further improve model sharing and reusability across drug applications and through the drug life cycle management. Can we use model master files as the venue? So for model master files, is certainly, as Dr. Lionberger has mentioned, very many good benefit. So before we're talking about a model master file, let's just focus on model sharing, standardization, and archiving regulatory submissions. That alone will give benefit to regulatory stakeholders, can break down the organizational silos. For example, the current reviewer can just conveniently review the comment and input from the previous reviewer regarding the same model for the same regulatory use. And therefore, that can be enhancing the review consistency, quality, and efficiency. For the current reviewer, if the model being encountered in the first time, the comment and thought and the effort made to the model can be shared to the next one. And for industry stakeholders, the benefit is to save effort to duplicate the same model or modeling practices over and over. So you can refer to the master file that's been communicated with FDA as a means to reduce the communication cost. We know the turnaround to initiate the meeting with FDA is quite effort-taking, needs several months turnaround time. So with the model master files being discussed before, you do not need to do that again and again. And also, it's true for FDA reviewers. You do not need deploy product management resources, scientific review, and additional resources to repeat the effort. Certainly, model sharing can enhance the awareness of model and simulation advancement and the use in the regulatory setting. For all stakeholders, we are building a transparent and positive ecosystem for the use of models can maximize the impact model for regulatory use and increase the community to convene the effort with to maximize the modeling impact in the regulatory setting. Every new thing have some pros and cons. What could it be if we have new initiatives? We need to think about build mechanism to manage the unintended impacts, the downside. So we need if we build a model master file mechanism, we need to think about ways to accommodate the dynamic nature of the models and the data. So with the rolling evolution of model and the rolling data, so how can we constantly update the model? That's kind of a unique feature of model as opposed to active pharmaceutical ingredient. The other thing we wanted to put into close consideration is how to allow multiple models coexist for the same purpose. We don't want the model master file in the future become the roadblocker for innovation. In other words, with the presence of one model, we also welcome other types of new models. Can we, for the new initiative, how to build a mechanism to eliminate monopoly? We don't want people to hide the proprietary information as secret. We want, in the same time, encourage scientific publications and build venues and a platform for public access to non-proprietary information. So that makes us to eye into the DMF pathway, drug master pathway. It's a standing regulatory mechanism for sharing files of different types. It's in good management of potential downsides associated with file sharing. I think please stay tuned for the next presentation by my colleague, Erin. It also being associated with realize the benefit for both industry and the FDA with good established guidance and the policies infrastructures. I want to share some key characteristics of drug master files because before the workshop, we kind of spent 3 years to pave the way to make today's workshop happen. We overheard some feedback on model master file. I don't want to make the proprietary information readily available, public available to anyone else, and how would the model master file block other master files entry, etc., etc. But here you can appreciate some nice features with drug master file. The drug master file holders can authorize one or more applicants or sponsors to incorporate reference to the same master file. In other words, multiple applications can use the same master file for their application. And they don't have to, the owner don't have to disclose the information to the applicants or sponsors as a way to protect the proprietary information. Drug master files are reviewed in connection with the review of applications that reference them. In other words, that can mitigate some concerns from within FDA that would that increase the regulatory workload. No, because drug master files won't be reviewed until it is associated with the application. It is not mandatory for applicants or sponsors to use drug master file. It means you can choose whether you want to use it or not. If you don't see a benefit, feel free to go with the conventional way for drug application. Multiple drug master files can coexist with the same regulatory use. We welcome more model files for the same purpose as a way to incentivize the competition and make the community a vibrant community. And the owners can update DMF at any time. This kind of a way that can be used to accommodate the dynamic nature of a model. Drug master files can assume multiple tabs. There are 5 tabs in drug master file. That also probably the question, can we have multiple tabs for model master files? Currently in consideration is that the model master file can basically have 3 tabs. The first tab could be a product, or API specific model. Second, it could be a methodology, a good modeling practice that can be applied to multiple products for the same purpose of use. Third, it could be a verified or validated virtual physiological organ or system. For example, a virtual skin, a virtual lung, virtual eye, that can be subsequently connected with the drug product specific information. You can build on top of that. Certainly in this workshop, we really welcome your constructive comment in terms of potential tabs for model master files. So when to consider a model master file? Not all files, modeling packages, components will fit into the model master file framework. So we will say models with proprietary information, models that is costly to be developed, and models representing a highly reusable method or practice may benefit from model master files. That include, just as I said, virtual organs for the purpose of use, some niche PBPK models, certain systems pharmacology models, for example, for safety risk evaluation. If FDA has take a say on that, others can leverage on that. So machine learning models for in vivo correlation, for example, I know some faculties in the audience been doing that, and it's hard to develop, involve large amount of data, very costly. Can it be consolidated into master file at this moment? For models that may not fit into the framework at master file, could include not necessarily like a conventional population PK models for covariance screening, for example. That's been well-established practice. We see limited benefit to have master file for covariance screening. For some routine exploratory response analysis models, logistic regression, survival analysis, this well-established, we may not need a master file. Conventional PK-PD relationships, like the direct, indirect turnover models, we may not need a master file. We welcome more of your thought in the breakout, absolutely. So when we talk about a model master file, just want you keep in mind about the 2 guiding principles. One is model diversity and inclusion. Diversity represents we welcome different types of models for the same purpose. We welcome innovation, creative thought that can be validated for regulatory use. We also think about FAIR principle. FAIR stands for findable, acceptable, interoperable, and reusable. This FAIR principle was initially proposed in 2016 for reusability of scholarly data, and then extended to include the software, tools, algorithms, workflows that produce data. Certainly model produce data. The data produced by the model can be used for to support regulatory approval. So they fit into the category. You can appreciate naturally about the findable, acceptable, and reusable property of a model master file, but here I also want to stress on interoperable. If the model can be built that it can be easily integrated with other model types, it can ease the effort to keep building on top of it. And the application can only refer to the model and then build on top of it that can build some unique feature for your application. In this workshop, we sincerely welcome your thought on how to further define model master files. We have a publication in January which summarized the thought and input from all the stakeholders from previous workshops. And certainly this is the dedicated workshop for model master file. We really want to implement things, make things operational after this. We definitely welcome your further thought on how to define model master files. What are the potential types of model master files? How to maximize the benefit and impacts of model master files? So how can we build operational flow work that can mitigate all the concerns, but increase all the good side of having model master file. How to build the most positive and productive ecosystem. How to mitigate unintended consequences. The model master file, as I mentioned at the beginning, the concept doesn't come at easy. So the idea actually emerged as early as 2021. Before that, in the coffee times, we discussed about it, even in 2018, in coffee times, when we slowly come together, converge to the idea model master file, how to make the model application in regulatory more effective, more shareable, more integrable, and more unique, more officialized. So this is the effort I think the whole community need to carry on their shoulders. I know Dr. Peck talked about standing on the shoulders of giants. I think we all have our own shoulders. We need this reflect the shoulders of many people behind the scene, like including Rob Lionberger, Dr. Lei Zhang from ORS, and certainly Division of Quantitative Method Modeling. Everyone in the division contributed to it. I only here listed the team leader's name on it. And many of the DQMM scientists actually in the audience will take care of the scribe or moderate the breakout sessions. And also want to thank the Office of Bioequivalence Leadership, Dr. Partha. He critically contributed, supported the effort and supported the idea. And colleagues from Office of Clinical Pharmacology, Dr. Isam Zinei, Dr. Xiumei Huang, she will give an opening remark tomorrow. Raj, who is the center director for the quantitative medicine, and Dr. Hao Zhu, I think he's in the audience. Absolutely, I want to thank the external contributors, especially Dr. Karl Peck, Dr. Amin Rostami, who's sitting there. They participated in the previous workshops, contributed critically, and there are many previous workshop contributors to the concept. I cannot list all the names here, but please accept our sincere thanks. Last and not least, I want to thank all modelers in the field, everyone in the audience who are giving a physical appearance here, and also everyone online who will make contributions to this key concept to elevate the modeling community as a whole. Thank you. I will pass the podium to Erin.
Thank you, Dr. Zhao. I would like to invite Erin now to the podium.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Erin. I'm trying to figure out how to move the mouse. Okay. I am a chemist in the Office of Product Quality Assessment 3 in OPQ. And my team is responsible for reviewing drug master files to support GDUFA Type 2 DMFs. And we review the drug substance, chemistry, manufacturing, and controls. And when Eleftheria asked me to give this talk today, I was very excited because I know that she has worked very hard to make this session very useful for you, as well as the team to make this whole workshop useful. And so I hope that I've done the topic of drug master files justice, but in case I've missed anything that you're interested in, I will be here for the rest of the day, so please feel free to let me know what I missed. So quick disclaimer first, this presentation reflects the views of me and shouldn't be construed to represent the views of the agency. And I'll start off with OPQ's goal, which is that everyone deserves confidence in their next dose of medicine. Pharmaceutical quality assures that the availability, safety, and efficacy of every dose. Sorry, I'm not sure why it's not advancing. Oh, that one. Oh. Okay, well, I didn't hit that button at all yet. Somehow I managed to advance the slide, so sorry about that. My talk will briefly discuss what model master files are, what drug master files are, the benefits of master files, and the operational considerations for master files. So as you know, Model Master File is a quantitative model or modeling platform that has undergone sufficient model verification and validation to be recognized as shareable intellectual property that's acceptable for regulatory purposes. And there are a lot of experts in this area to hear today. Instead, my talk will focus on drug master files, which are submissions that provide confidential, detailed information about facilities, processes, or articles used in the manufacturing, processing, and packaging, and storing of human drug products. So specifically, they allow parties to reference material without disclosing DMF contents to other parties. So proprietary information is protected. DMFs are not required by statute or regulation, so they're optional to reference. And DMFs are neither approved nor disapproved. Instead, they're reviewed in connection with an application that is referencing it. There are 4 types of drug master files. Type 2 contains drug substance intermediates, or drug products. Type 3 is for packaging material. Type 4 is for excipients, colorants, flavors, etc. And type 5 is for FDA-accepted reference information. And type 5 is the type that MMFs would be submitted under. So some of the benefits of master files that have been alluded to earlier this morning are the use of a single assessment. So when, say, for example, ANDA 1 is submitted to the agency, that application can contain all of the information that's necessary for the application, like the drug product, drug substance, packaging, excipients, flavorings. If ANDA 2 comes in at the same time for the same drug product, it could also submit all of that information in its own application. However, and then each of these would be assessed for their own assessment in their entirety. However, if the drug substances are purchased from the same manufacturer, the applicants can then reference a type 2 drug master file, and that information can be reviewed in a single assessment in for DMFA. Likewise, if the flavoring is purchased from the same company, the applicants can reference a type 4 drug master file B and assess the information there. So this allows for less duplication of review work, as well as a single assessment, which hopefully improves efficiency. There's also the possibility for a shorter review time. So if ANDA 1 is for an oral suspension drug product, and it references this type 2 drug master file for an API, and then ANDA 3 comes in later after ANDA 1 is approved and the DMF is adequate, and it's for an injectable. The ANDA 3, the review of DMFA for ANDA 3 can be a much shorter process in that the assessors can make sure that it is able to support ANDA 3 rather than starting from scratch, since it had already been reviewed for ANDA 1. Additional benefits of master files include the fact that FDA publishes a quarterly list of all active DMFs, and this was mentioned earlier too. This list includes the DMF number, the submission date, the holder, and the subject. And that subject is like the title, and it can be as specific or as general as is needed by the holder. Also, holders and applicants can specialize. So if your company is good at manufacturing oral tablets, you don't also need to be an expert in manufacturing API or a flavoring. Some operational considerations of master files are that, again, DMFs are not approved nor disapproved. So they are determined to be adequate to support an application or inadequate to support an application. So it is possible that if 2 ANDAs are referencing a drug master file, it could be that the DMF is adequate to support one ANDA and inadequate to support the other ANDA. DMFs are submitted in ECTD format. That's required, and all of them are submitted electronically, except type 3 DMFs. The ICH M4 guideline outlines the content of the DMF and electronic submissions, and there's a DMF guidance that you may find helpful that has a lot more information about the things that are included in a drug master file. And all of this helps to facilitate the review of the DMF. So it's really helpful to us to, as was mentioned earlier, knowing where all of this information is and then knowing the format and understanding the format allows us to facilitate review. And I've highlighted 2 presentations that were given recently in a Type 2 Drug Master File Conference, but these 2 presentations in particular might be helpful to you as you submit an electronic DMF or need to administratively manage a DMF. After a DMF is submitted, changes can be made to it, and these changes are called amendments. These amendments are either administrative in nature or quality amendments. Quality amendments include technical updates, should include a summary of changes table, and the changes are what are assessed by the FDA. So for example, when we review a Type 2 Drug Master File, an original submission, we review it in its entirety. However, when changes made, we review those specific changes and focus on those, which allows for additional efficiency. There's a lot of flexibility in referencing. So again, DMFs are not required, but they can be referenced by ANDAs, NDAs, BLAs, with the exception of Type 2 DMFs can't be referenced by BLAs except in specific situations, INDs, and generic and new veterinary drug applications. They can also be referenced by other drug master files. Additionally, there's some flexibility in that you can partially reference a DMF. For example, one flavoring can be referenced in a Type 4 DMF that has many flavorings. A single component in a Type 3 DMF that has multiple components could be referenced. And, or an intermediate in a Type 2 DMF for an API. So an applicant can either reference the API or they can choose, in this case, to reference intermediate Z. So partial referencing is possible. Also, there's some flexibility in changing the output of the DMF. So what I mean by that is, say there are 2 applications referencing the same DMF. One is oral, one is injectable, and the injectable needs to be sterile. If the API in DMFA is not sterile, ANDA 3 can purchase the material, and that sterilization can happen under the process described in ANDA 3. So similarly, if a model is submitted in a drug master file or an MMF, it can be then updated, or a new version can be added in the ANDA potentially, so that you can update from the base of what was submitted in the DMF. And here I've just listed some resources that might be helpful to you moving forward. And then I just want to quickly summarize. As we set the stage for model master files, it's important to remember the benefits that can be gained from such reference and regulatory submissions, such as improved efficiency in reviews, shorter review time, and overall flexibility. And it's also worth noting that while model master files are new, drug master files are not, and a lot can be gained from the lessons we've learned in drug master files over the years. So thank you, Eleftheria, for the invitation to talk, and thank you to CRCG and to all of you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Skoda. Now I would like to invite Dr. Tim Nicholas to the podium to deliver his talk. Thank you.
Open this back up here. Good morning, everybody, and I thank you, Eleftheria, for inviting me down here for the talk today. I've been enjoying the weather. It's been cold up in Connecticut, so it's wonderful to see the sunshine. So we've been talking already about some drug master files and model master files and the use, and I'm going to switch the topic a little bit. It's sort of my nature, but I'll go into model development life cycle from an industry perspective. So to start off, I'm Tim Nicholas. I'm from Pfizer. I'm the head of technology innovation within the Pharmacometrics and Systems Pharmacology organization. And we look at, in our area, everything from coming in a non-clinical space through submissions, NDA, into supplementary NDAs following on there. The model development lifecycle is something of how we look at models going forward and seeing how this can actually apply to further models. So I will try this. Just watching the buttons are actually working, so here we go. So I want to start off with a little bit, what is a model? Models can be lots of different things. They can be very, very simplistic, they can be complex, but in a general sense, a model truly is a series of equations, parameters, fixed, random, so we can understand central tendencies, we can understand the distributions of what's coming in. And these are constructs that are based on observations, series of assumptions, series of data, being able to pull data from multiple sources, and then going to characterize a system. And that system can be, as Long brought up earlier, an aspect of an artificial organ, or it can be as more simplistic as a population PK model. And this has been a wonderful aspect of looking at generation over time. So these are simple and complex. These are ubiquitous within our systems. We're ubiquitous in actually our daily activities. The number of models that we have in our smartphones we don't look at, but we use every day, it's constant. They're used across the development spectrum. This is something where I bring up a population PK model as a wonderful example here. Dr. Peck brought this up earlier. Here is the forefront of what was going through, and now is one of the foundations of drug development, of being able to actually have a good predictive case for exposure and understanding your dosing regimen going forward. These models are useful there. A lot of aspects of what is the what-if scenario. A model can go through and answer this if that model is appropriately comprised with the observations, parameterization, and how we want to look at that. And the other piece, this is an input into other models. So models are objects. Most models we think about here is the final aspect, it's the publication, it's something we've used. But in reality, that model can be an object that's plugged into another model and can be in a series of complex models coming together. And that's something I've seen that's sort of similar to the DMF concept of being able to take parts of different DMFs, pulling together. But these models can be the same way in the sense of, I'll use the example, pharmacokinetic models. That can be plugged into an exposure response model. It can be plugged into a safety model. It can be plugged into a complex systems pharmacology model because they can be used as independent objects. And one of the cases we're going through, as expected, everything takes more information. As we get more information, we get greater precision, greater understanding of how that model is characterizing not only the observed data, but also the observed variability of the system. And that enables that better precision for forecasting. So model development life cycle. This is not a new thing. This is actually something that was brought up at ACOP, I think in 2019 by Dr. Gasquet, and this is very akin to a software development life cycle. But I think it's important to think about here because this is how we over the past 20 years have been looking at working with models and how they are being brought forward. And so we always start with that bottom corner of new information, new data. We have something coming in preclinical or from a clinical space. We have 3 doses. We have a little bit of pharmacokinetic data. How are we bringing that in? And we can start with an exploratory analysis, capturing that. We then go into building a model. Some pieces that are not as exciting, but are incredibly important, the quality control. Someone actually reviewing that, making sure that we're not making some big jumps, and then the actual reporting of that, or I'd say deployment of that model. It's an action of being able to capture that model, write it down, or put it in a slide, or document it in some form of electronic way. That, we've gone through all the steps. We have a model that's actually ready to go and is deployed as a specific version. When we get additional data, this model is now then updated. It can continue to grow. Maybe the structure needs to change. Maybe we have a new population, some other baseline characteristic that's going to affect one of the aspects of the model, goes through the cycle again, and we're able to see where we need to be. We have a redeployed next version of that model, and then we can use that model. I wanted to separate the development side from the utility side, because the utility of models has been brought up, incredibly valuable and huge pieces. Primarily, it's an input to a decision. And I think of inputs and outputs because this is how we connect pieces, but drug-making decisions all across the board, quantitative decisions are influenced by models, the assumptions in the models and how they're coming through, being able to document that, make sure everyone's on board with those assumptions really captures that. It's an input into other models, looking at as we expanding exposure into a pharmacodynamic model, a safety model, a QSP model. All of these are connections as we are building those models together as objects. Trial simulations. I loved the comment earlier about the ecophenolate mofetil example for a trial simulation. My first company that I worked for was Syntex. And so I wasn't in pharmacometrics at the time, but I wish I was, so I could say I was connected with that. But it's that trial simulation and the ability to use trial simulations to bring things forward is a key aspect for understanding the model, understanding the system, and understanding how this novel drug, or in our case novel, or a complex generic, can come forward. And then finally, this would be an input into a decision, into a submission that's going to come through and be able to be summarized to a larger sense. Implications of model development life cycle. This model evolves. This is a standard concept, not always brought up because we see sometimes only in the literature the final model. Here's the final model post-submission of all the data from all the studies coming together. But that's not how a model evolves. That's not how a model is created. It's created in a piece. More information comes in. The model's further refined. It's further developed. The quality's built into it. And then we have that piece. But a key structure we brought up earlier, we're not reinventing the wheel. We're not reusing things. We are taking an understanding and being able to expand upon it. This enables also the use of models and combined models, I like to think, as specific stage gates where quality is built in with each cycle for internal decision-making, for external, I would say, external impact, the regulatory components, and then also enables the use of the models as objects. And so if we have an understanding of mechanism, we have an understanding of how this is going to connect within say a systems model, but we have a novel compound coming up, we can plug and play. Here's the new pharmacokinetic model plugging into that systems model. That's done because we have systems as objects and we have some quality built into each of those models. So I like that. That's sort of the framework I think about. It's a framework that I've seen in a variety of other areas. Let's look at some of the examples. So I have a few examples today, and this is where we've been able to utilize some of the models that we've developed or other areas have developed. And this is all, you'll see the literature references for everything going forward because it's an easy way to grab onto some of the concepts here. So example one, renal and hepatic impairment studies. This is, we do this pretty much for most every small molecule. Every company does this, so it has to understand the pharmacokinetics of a novel molecule as part of the clinical drug development. Is there going to be an impact to dosing, some impact to the label for people that have a renal impairment or a hepatic impairment? This has been ongoing for decades. We look at this, and typically this is a focused clinical trial. It's very tight, and it's performed using a healthy participant cohort That's going to be in a similar age and demographic match to severe and moderate impairment cohorts to be able to say, are we seeing a change in that pharmacokinetics? And usually the pharmacokinetic comparisons are done through non-compartmental analysis, which is a very relatively efficient way of looking at that without quite a few assumptions. So the piece that I'd like to bring up today is a work by Dr. Purohit, and fairly recently, last year, this came through. But this was looking at clinical studies to evaluate the impact of renal and hepatic impairment on the pharmacokinetics of a compound that was being brought forward. And part of this study, these studies, these were ongoing, these were planned, we're scheduled to have everything on time. We have both hepatic and renal studies that are being enrolled. We have a severe hepatic impairment cohort that's going through. We have the healthy, the moderate. We have the severe renal impairment cohort going through. And we have the healthy participants that will be coming in near the end. But then we ran into COVID. And COVID slowed us down of being able to say, we can't bring in efficiently a healthy participant cohort. And how do we look at this? This is a place normally we need this by a standard study, we need that healthy volunteer cohort. But one of the pieces that was brought up, and Dr. Purohit brought up and said, do we need more healthy volunteers, or can we generate that data through the models we already have? And so it's wonderful. I suggest going through the paper. It's a very wonderful paper, and I'm going to give you the highlights here. But the solution we came up to was to generate that in silico healthy participant cohort. And the way we looked at that, went through a series of trials that were all trial simulations, being able to say we have a fit-for-purpose model, had already gone through model development life cycle 1, and I would say it's very 1 because it was very fit for purpose. But then we were able to say, here we could match what we are looking at within these demographics, simulate thousands of studies, be able to see what that central tendency is, be able to see the distribution of exposures within that area, and then calculate this compared to our hepatic and renal impairment. This utilized, I would say, the earliest deployment of that POP-PK model to create that in silico cohort, but we felt that it was acceptable because we had gone through the QC, we'd gone through the full development life cycle, part 1, with that early stage of data. I will also admit that that model has been updated, given more information, slightly more complex, but the overall characteristics are the same. And the final outcome here was the study was concluded without the need for that healthy participant cohort. And again, this made things more efficient. COVID is driving all of this because we weren't able to bring them in, but it was an acceptable solution. With that said, being an acceptable solution, it also shows that we may not need to have a healthy participant cohort in all the cases. We may not need to subject people that would not be gaining benefit to a compound to testing in this case, if we have sufficient information already that's characterized in a model. And so I like to see this as a nice efficient use of an in silico area. So that was a nice simplistic population PK model. I like to get something a little bit more advanced. And so Parkinson's disease. One of the things I do love is neuroscience. It was an area that I would see a lot of opportunity for use in the modeling area. So Parkinson's disease, as many probably know, is the second most common neurodegenerative disease, affecting 2 to 3% of the people over 65 years of age. I listed here is a wonderful review if anybody wants to dig in more, talking about different aspects specifically on dopamine transporter and dopamine deficiency within the disease etiology itself. We can say there's some key aspects for the disease. It's linked to a toxic accumulation of alpha-synuclein, and there are symptoms that have been tracked in different scales, looking at motor and non-motor symptoms, increasing severity with the progression of disease. So when we think about that disease, there's a disease progression over time, and it continues, there's a continued worsening. There's a variability around that that needs to be captured as we're thinking about that. But it's hard to be able to bring in people into a trial. It's hard to make sure that we have an efficient clinical trial so we can say this compound is working or this compound is not sufficient for the needs. So within this case, as part of an external group, and this is Dr. Conrado et al., had built a disease progression model and developed using that. So it's a disease progression model based on the UPDRS, so Unified Parkinson's Disease Rating Scale. We have a lot of good acronyms with the MDS and the Movement Disorder Society components, and they were combined together. Being able to see this scale and be able to see the motor component of this scale as a trajectory over time and being able to characterize that was the first goal. This goal not only was able to capture the characterization of that, but also included the dopamine, the DAT scanning or imaging aspect there, to be able to say there are inclusion criteria of people that would be progressing faster, people that would be progressing slower. And so part of this analysis, you can see here within that central panel, these are visual predictive checks of the model and actually simulations coming out of that. You can see that depending on the DAT scan, yes or no criteria, people would progress faster, a more aggregate slope, or slower, a flatter slope. And this was something that the model was able to pull out. And with that, you can now also look at a more efficient trial design. And so the far right corner, being able to say, if you're using a biomarker enrichment, we're able to say, we can actually have a smaller study to test that primary finding. Is this drug being effective as a disease progression model, or is there something where this drug needs to have, has a smaller effect or a larger effect? That's what this can actually drive. So this came through. This was a wonderful peer-reviewed publication. So I think in the model development lifecycle aspect, so it's not internal to our organization. This is in the larger world of the critical path. This was, I consider, deployed because we've gone through the critical peer review process, and that's a model that can be used. So why did I bring this model up specifically? There's a lot of models that are being brought forward and actually used for disease progression models out there. This model was actually brought to the EMA, and as part of that, looking for the qualification of the enrichment of a biomarker. So using a biomarker to enrich a clinical trial and getting buy-in qualification on there for a specific context of use. So the critical path for Parkinson's Consortium, so it's a global consortium looking at Parkinson's disease and bringing data together, put that documentation together, model and context of use, submitted it. There was some very robust discussions, and the context of use came through that the enrichment using this biomarker would be able to be used for enriching of a clinical trial for early motor Parkinson's disease. And so this was something where other companies can now reuse this concept, reuse this piece, this modeling aspect, because it's already come forward. And you can see the CHMP opinion. I just copied that out there. But the key piece here that I'd like to think is following that model development life cycle, this is something where we've been able to bring in quality, bring in collaboration across many different colleagues, both industrial and academic, to be able to come forward with a qualified use and a more efficient trial design that now everybody can build on. I think I'm doing well on time, so I'm going to squeeze in my third example here. The third example, as we get a little more complex, Duchenne muscular dystrophy. And this is also with critical path. This has been a case where DMD is a rare disease, and this is linked to a genetic disorder and is caused by mutations in the gene that encodes dystrophin. And This is something very critical. It happens to children at a very early age, and you see a disease progression across that that expands and then will be changing, is variable from early development into later development. And being able to characterize the time course of the disease, and thereby have a more efficient way of testing is something effective, was the key focus here. So within this example, I bring up forward the paper by Dr. Lanyan, and this was the modeling, but it was also looking at developing a tool, so a clinical trial simulation tool. And this is something where, again, we'll do this in the industry side. We'll build it from our basic models so people can simulate and think about things. But this was actually brought forward so that we could be using across the larger board. So we had a model. It went through peer review publication. Models very well accepted. The clinical trial simulation platform. It's another acronym. I keep changing the acronyms, or actually, in this case, I'm not changing the acronyms. I'm learning the new acronym. But this is a case where we're looking at how well we can simulate an understanding of, if we come in with a certain type of demographics for a population, what is that profile going to look like over a period of time? And this was within one paper. In parallel, and it's similar to the other concept with the DMF, another set of authors published another disease progression model for DMD. And this is what I find the wonderful aspect of science is someone comes forward and says, here's what we're going to do, here's the right characteristics and the right parameters, and characterizes the data. And then another group can say, we can do that similarly, slightly different parameterization, but it brings forward a greater confidence in both models, that we now have two models that are describing the data, similar parameterization, and being able to describe the output. So that's, I saw that as a increased rigor for that model development lifecycle aspect, having the very solid QC. And then this model was also presented to the EMA for qualification. And there was a letter of support for the clinical trial simulation platform. It was not a qualified statement, but this is also something I think is very important for us in the industry and being able to build models. There are times where a model is sufficient, fully qualified, or models are on the right path, and that's why I saw this as the letter of support, where further validation was encouraged. And so that further validation is something that can be worked on now. With that said, this final model has been used by other agencies, and I'd say will be continue to be used to be able to predict into what's going on within the DMD populations. So in conclusion, I talked about the model development life cycle, and I'm thinking about that since, because I'm in the very first round of development for a program, and sometimes with the supplemental NDAs and the SBLAs. But utilizing models is efficient drug development. That truly is what it is. MIDD, it's another acronym, but model-informed drug development, that is a passion. It is the reason for pulling this together. The model development life cycle has a plethora of impacts, and from both internal decision-making, internal growth, but also into our regulatory aspects and being able to say we have a quality-driven model here. And the other big piece is it enables models being as objects. And that's something that I see as a key aspect, which I don't think we have as shared as much within the literature area, because being able to say my POP-PK model or my neutropenia model connects in with the larger systems model, connects in with a safety model or efficacy model. It's times where we try to put them all together instead of being able to say these are truly separate objects that can interplay fairly well. Implications of the model development lifecycle, MDLC, to the model master file, MMF. just so I can go through all the acronyms and reuse them again. I see this as a precursor. This is a precursor, an earlier stage of saying, before we're at the place of actually using that model master file, or bringing a drug, or bringing a series of models to that model master file, this is that first round. It's that first concept of how those models are being built, that evolution of the models, and then how they're pulled together. And I would say multiple versions of the life cycle really increases the confidence in that model, increases the ability to understand the precision of how we are looking at that and how it's being used. So with that, I will stop there, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Nicholas. Now, the last talk for today by Dr. Kollipara. Please join us.
So good morning, everyone. My name is Sivacharan, and I belong to Dr. Reddy's Laboratories. First of all, I would like to thank CRCG for providing me an opportunity to share a couple of thoughts on the generic product development with respect to model master file. And all the previous speaker, especially Dr. Robert, has talked about impact of MMF that can provide on the generic product development because of the huge number of and applications, as well as because of the fact that there is already a lot of information available in the public domain from the innovator in terms of efficacy and safety. So as a continuation of that, I'm going to talk about model master file framework in the generic product development, a couple of challenges, opportunities, and I will end up with a couple of case examples. So the opinions described in this presentation are of mine, and they do not represent the statements or opinions of Dr. Reddy's Laboratories. These are brief overview of the contents of my presentation. I'm going to talk about applications of modeling and simulation in generic product development, and then some background about MMF in the context of generic product development and how do we integrate this with the model integrated evidence, a couple of case examples, and then opportunities and challenges. So these are a couple of examples or the potential areas where modeling can contribute to generic product development, especially from the biopharmaceutics and obtaining the bioequivalent study waivers. Everybody is aware of this, but from the biopharmaceutics perspective, we can use modeling approaches to overcome the dissolution dissimilarity issues, to assess the bioequivalence between reference drug product and as well as the test product, to establish the dissolution safe space, to set the specifications for various process parameters, to establish critical bioavailability attributes, and also from the material side to establish the specifications for API PSD. So what can be a couple of models that can be used in the generic product development that comes under the context of model master file? The first one is the PBBM, and also which can be interchangeably used as PBPK. PBBM is something when you use PBPK for biopharmaceutics applications. In the context of PBBM, we can use the models to focus on the absorption aspects, to study the impact of dissolutions, to support the biowaivers, to support F2 mismatch. On the PBPK aspect, we can use this for evaluating the gender impact, for example, which is one of the regulatory query that we are receiving, and also to perform the drug-drug interactions in case we are coming up with a couple of fixed dosage forms. IV-IVC, IV-IVR, this is something that we are going to listen more in the next couple of days, but there are different types of models, conventional as well as mechanistic IV-IVC models. And we also have seen something about the POP-PK models, which we basically use in the generic product development to understand the impact of covariates on the bioequivalence outcome. So what are those different types of models that comes under the context of model master file in generic product development? Can be PBBM, PBPK, IV-IVC, and IV-IVR. So before I dwell into the concept of MMF, I would like to talk about modeling-based justifications to regulatory agencies and a couple of common queries that are received. Typically, as a part of the regulatory submissions, we submit the PBBM, PBPK modeling report. Tycho is going to talk a little more on the PBBM template that is coming up. Along with the report, we also give modeling raw data files. They can be encrypted or decrypted. And along with the modeling files, we share supporting files and sensitivity analysis. In terms of the common queries that are received from these models, justification and optimization of certain parameters, especially something on the dissolution data input models, biorelevancy of the media that were used, and mechanistic framework of the model, totality of evidence, and most importantly, validation of the model against the bioequivalence data. These are some of the queries that we receive on the models, and we will see how this will span out in the context of MMF in the subsequent slides. So with this background, let us see what exactly is the MMF in the context of generic product development. You would have seen this definition coming from all the speakers for a couple of times now, but model master file is a quantitative modular modeling platform that has undergone sufficient validation and verification, and it is to be recognized as a shareable intellectual property. And the characteristics of this MMF are portable, reusable, generalizable, and shareable. And these types of model master files can be applicable to across the products and formulations for specific purposes with modifications as and when it is required. So when we talk about model master file, basically this will consist of two parts. One is the software part, which has computational framework and couple of system parameters. And here we have two different types of platforms, open source and non-open source. And in terms of once the software is available, then as a next step, we build the base model wherein we incorporate all the physicochemical properties as well as the pharmacokinetics and physiology. And then software platform together with the base model, they consist of the model master file, which you can subsequently use it for different applications once the model is kind of developed as well as validated. So where exactly the submission of MMF fits into the generic product framework? Basically, being in a generic company, we have seen that typically we use modeling and simulation to get the internal confidence on the bioequivalence. And however, the use of modeling and simulation approaches, especially PBBM, is increasing over time in terms of the regulatory submissions. So if you see this particular diagram, there is a general timeline or the flowchart for the development of generic product, starting from pre-development, product development until the regulatory filing. So coming to the context of the MMF in the life cycle of the generic product development, MMF can be reviewed, it can be submitted at any point of time to the regulatory agency, but it will be reviewed and assessed only when it is referenced with a specific application number. So here a representation has been given, like when you can submit a particular MMF to the regulatory agency, and once the MMF is approved as a part of the drug product, the same MMF can be referred by other applicants and other applications as well. So at this point of time, based on the current understanding, this is how a MMF can look like in the context of the timeline of the generic product development. Liang was also talking about model integrated evidence, and on this slide we just thought we will provide some overview about integrating model integrated evidence with the MMF. I think everyone is aware about the model integrated evidence program, the pilot program that is launched by US FDA in October 2023, with an encouragement, with an objective to encourage the generic product companies to use the model integrated evidence approaches for complex generics formulation development and also to support BCS biowaivers. So typically there are three different steps that are existing in the model integrated evidence program. The step one is model integrated evidence meeting request. Second step is meeting preparation and conduct, and followed by the post-meeting communication. So along with the MIA request, this offers a possibility to talk about possibility of model master file to the regulatory agency. For example, in the first step, along with the MIA approach, we can also talk about MMF approach and the potential applications that can come up in the product development lifecycle. And in the step two, we can, during the interactions with agency, we can clarify about the MMF approach and various applications. And ultimately, during the step three, the agency can provide their feedback on the potential MMF as a part of this particular model integrated evidence program. This is just a thought at this point of time, but I feel during this workshop, we will get to understand or refine this particular procedure further. Having this background, I just would like to talk about a couple of examples in the context of generic product development, what exactly an MMF looks like. The case example one is a single model that has multiple applications. The MMF title is Justification for the Absence of Gender Impact in the Bioequivalence Study for Drug Product A. Recently, we start to receive a lot of queries from the regulatory agencies on the impact of gender on the bioequivalence, because especially in India, because of the socio-cultural reasons, we typically include only the male population, but as the drug product is intended for both the genders or both the sexes, this is one of the query that we receive to extrapolate the BE results obtained in one specific gender to other gender. So in this case, MMF title is model development validation for the intended purpose for the drug product. In terms of the regulatory context, it is again to justify the absence of impact of gender on the bioequivalent study. In this case, the model has been built using all the physicochemical properties, but this particular API is a substrate for a lot of enzymes and transporters, so all those kinetics are also included. And the model has been extensively validated with past as well as the failed bioequivalent studies. So the representation of the model outcome is what is given at the below. The model predicted that there is no impact of specific gender on the pharmacokinetic profiles. So what can be the potential model master file applications for drug product A are what is listed here. So since the model is built based on the enzymes and transporter kinetics, this can be used for studying the drug-drug interaction potential with other drugs. And we can also establish the bioequivalence in fasting and fed condition. And this model also has been used to set the specifications of the dissolution. And gender impact is one of the applications that we have seen previously. We also would like to elaborate a little bit on the credibility framework of this model, which was discussed thoroughly in the last year PBBM workshop. In terms of the decision consequence as well as the model influence, the model credibility is found to be medium side, because being a generic product from the gender impact perspective, already some literature is available in the innovator label as well as in the public domain, and our model is providing kind of supporting evidence to that. Talking about case example 2, justifying the dissolution specifications for drug product B. And here again, the MMF type will be model development and validation to justify the dissolution specification for the drug product. In terms of scientific rationale, again, the model has been built based on all the physicochemical properties, and most importantly, using the biopredictive, the QC dissolution media. And then we have developed a semi-mechanistic model in this case, where the absorption has been described with the help of the transporters involvement in the model. And then the elimination has been described with conventional compartmental modeling. So here again, an outcome of the model that is given. So when we compare the minimum specifications as well as the maximum specifications, we achieved bioequivalence, thereby justifying the proposed dissolution specifications. So what can be a MMF potential for drug B is that this is an extended release formulation. The release is sensitive to the polymer content, and we will be able to evaluate the impact of polymer on the bioequivalence, thereby establishing polymer quantity as one of the critical viability attribute. And of course, we will be able to assess the bioequivalence in fasting and fed conditions, and we will be able to understand the discriminatory power of the dissolution from the in vivo context, and finally for establishing the dissolution safe space. And the model credibility framework is more or less similar to what we have seen in the previous case. So the last example that I have is using the model to address the safety aspects. The MMF title is justification of the safety of extended release product containing NTA drug product. So during the product stability, we have seen that there is an increase in the dissolution rate, especially at the acylated conditions. And being an NTA drug, agency asked us to evaluate the impact of these faster dissolution profiles on the safety. So to address this aspect, we have built this PPBM using all the inputs like solubility, permeability, biopredictive dissolution. And the model has been extensively validated against the literature information. And one more thing to add on here is that this particular molecule has IV-AVC established in the literature with the help of QC media. So this also has given us a lot of opportunity to use the literature data to validate and substantiate the model along with our in-house data. And what we can see from the model outcome is that even with the faster dissolution profiles, the highest Cmax that has been observed during the simulations is very well below the safety limits. And even when you consider the upper specifications, whatever the highest Cmax that has been achieved is very well below the safety limits, and thereby demonstrating that the faster dissolution profiles may not have impact on the safety of the drug product. So again, in this case as well, what can be the potential MMF opportunities is bioequivalence in fasting and fed condition, addressing the safety aspects. We also have utilized this model extensively for the critical viability attributes evaluation, wherein we studied the impact of compression force, fluid uptake, polymer content, and so on and so forth. And as we have done extensive model validation, this model also can be used to support the scale-up and post-approval changes. And more or less, the model credibility remains the same as that of the previous examples. And so these are a couple of case studies in the generic product development that are indicating the potential of MMF. And last but not the least, I would like to talk about some of the opportunities and potential challenges of MMF in the generic product development. In terms of opportunities, it gives an opportunity to align with a regulatory agency in terms of pre and or MIA proposal meetings. Of course, we also have witnessed about potential incentives and reduced product review timelines, and publicly available MMF, which can be used by the multiple applicants. And it can also facilitate multiple regulatory submissions and model reusability. And there is a possibility to reference one MMF in the other applications, especially when you are dealing with different dosage forms. And our previous speakers also have talked about consistency in the regulatory submissions, and most importantly, the knowledge sharing and potential collaborations that this can offer. In terms of the potential challenges, the same model may not work for a lot of other applications, especially in case of highly variable drugs, wherein the PK parameters will vary between different studies, and the same model cannot be used to read the PK outcome from the another study. And importantly, willingness of the sponsors to publicly share the MMF, that is something that will come up during the discussion today and tomorrow as well. Lack of data to validate the MMF, especially in the context of failed bioequivalent studies. Leverage to various regulatory agencies is also another topic, because how acceptable is this concept to other regulatory agencies? Potential alterations required in MMF, possibility of worsening of MMF, as we have seen in case of DMF as well from the previous presentations. Lack of availability of specific model parameters in the context of regulatory submissions. Although there has been a lot of data from innovator in terms of the efficacy and safety, some of the critical information related to transporters and metabolic enzymes may not be readily available. So in that cases, it hampers the use of model master file. And ultimately, as a generic company, we also would like to understand the impact of MMF on the regulatory timelines. So with this, summarizing my entire presentation together, MMF provides an extensive opportunities to reduce the product development timelines, as well as to facilitate the regulatory review. We have seen a lot of opportunities in terms of case examples, as well as some of the opportunities that I have mentioned, but we need to understand a little bit more on the potential challenges. And some of the additional thought with respect to MMF sharing among the other regulatory agencies, as well as other generic companies, and the willingness of the sponsors to share the MMF in the public domain are a couple of things that we need to discuss before we completely implement the MMF in the context of generic product development. So I would like to thank Dr. Tausif Ahmad, who is heading the Biopharmaceutics and Bioequivalence Group at Global Clinical Management at Dr. Reddy's, and Dr. Reddy's management for providing me all the infrastructure and support. And this work is not done by alone, sole person, but it has a lot of contributions from cross-functional teams and regulatory agencies. And finally, I would like to thank CRCG and FDA for giving me opportunity to share a couple of thoughts of MMF on the generic product development. This, thank you very much.
Yeah. So, yeah, great presentations for this session, right? I hope you guys enjoyed as much as I did. So now we are going to start a panel session, and Kay and I will co-moderate this session. So at this time, I would like to welcome our panel members to the panel. Okay, so I do want to make a comment before we start the panel session. We really strongly encourage like you guys active participation. So we really want to accommodate as many questions as possible from the audience. So if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand and we will give you the microphone. And then you can identify yourself, then you can ask the question. And for those of you who attend online, also we strongly encourage you, put your question in the Q&A box and we will try our best to accommodate. If not, we are in the planning stage to actually write a workshop summary. And if we do not address your question today, we will make sure to have some response in our workshop summary. So that way we will also address your question. With that, okay, I see a question.
Hello. Okay. Yeah, thank you for the great presentations this morning. This is Jin from AstraZeneca. We are a company doing the new drug development. So I would like to understand a little bit more about the model master file, how this is going to impact the new drug discovery and development. What would be the potential application of this MMF the new R&D or the new novel drugs? So that would be my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Team, you want to take it?
Hopefully
We'll
it's-
start from you.
Is this one working? Okay. I think it's a great question. It's a great question because we've been using modeling and simulation for a few decades now, and it's becoming more and more involved. But how does that transform from sort of the model development life cycle, building a model one-off, to a model master file? And I would say I see there's a variety of ways that this can go into that. One, with combining some of our models as objects. So if we have a compound, we may understand the pharmacology, we built a model around that. It might be more complex, a systems model, or it might be a PBPK model. And we're changing now with a new compound. So we have a novel mechanism coming along the way. We can plug that in a couple aspects. So you can actually have that larger model construct with a new model input. And that would be one way of using the model master file. I also look at it within PBPK models for bioequivalence, being able to, with having a novel drug in development, being able to say, can I take my understanding of everything so far and bring forward a novel formulation that's going to have similar profile, similar characteristics, without having to do an additional BE study during development. And that's, again, would be another to use. Two potential uses. I can think of more, but we can definitely talk offline if you'd like.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is a great question. We are actually in the space to actively explore and understanding the mechanism of model master file in the new drug development space. And we want to understand what are the pros and cons and how this is going to potentially affect our modeling community, especially in the new drug development space. And I want to welcome you to join us tomorrow. We're going to have a section on how we actually look at the reusable models and by using the currently available mechanisms. And also we want to have a broader discussion with the audience to understand how this model master file concept will potentially affect or potentially improve our new drug development with modeling simulation tools. Thank you.
Any more feedback from our panel members? Okay, Andy, before I come to you, I want to ask a quick question because Liang, you actually made a very powerful statement during your presentation. You said the time has come for us to really implement the model master file, and you conclude your talk with some questions. So just out of curiosity, one question you specifically asked is, how can we really maximize the impact, the benefit of model master file? So, I want to start from you. Can you provide a little context when you were asking that question in your presentation? What inputs you are soliciting from our audience as well from our panel members?
Yeah, sure. Before I address that question, since we only have 4 speakers, but we have a large panel, don't want the question only direct to the speakers. And we have all the important panel members, for example, Flora, representing EMA, traveled all the way to on-site for addressing questions. Feel free to kick in terms of addressing questions. Also, we welcome everyone, give a self-intro before question answering session. That's my proposal. Let's get back to the question. I think for model master file, the benefit could be categorized into 2 aspects. One, the operational efficiency, both for industry and the FDA. That has been illustrated on all the previous presentations by all of the speakers, including new drug and the generic drug team and the Siva, also by FDA. But for in terms of technical advance, I think model master file will be serving as a benchmark, like an agreement between industry and FDA. Here, the current status quo. So in the future, if you want to make a bigger impact, what the knowledge gap, so what the potential utilities, now we have a benchmark at least today. Then now we are not exalting our effort searching for literatures. This literature say something, and the other literatures say something else. Then that can create some confusion, chaotic situation for modeling utilities. I think one of the other aspects of advantage of having model master file is it will give us a benchmark and also level the ground. If FDA is announcing the availability of the drug master files, I think quarterly, right? Erin can comment on that. So it's not going to announce all the proprietary information, but the subject, the title of the master file. Then with that, other firms like a smaller firm or medium-sized firms, they can also take advantage of take the right of using the model to address regulatory questions, address their need without doing a very burdensome study to meet the regulatory assessment. I think there are many other things in terms of stimulate, incentivize new model development, because if people see a value, a model in regulatory use, and that got officialized, that got announced, that definitely can incentivize the effort in the field to develop more useful models, impact-making models. I'll stop here. I think there are someone.
Yeah. Other comments?
Other comments to follow?
Yeah.
The other aspect you say with bringing forward a model master file and being able to use it is some things we may not be planning for right now. A lot of the pharmacometric models and the other systems models that we've been developing over the years, we haven't thought about all the applications until sometimes an application presents itself. And then having that model master file, being able to utilize that across the board, enables that utility instead of someone thinking, this might be a good idea, but now I have to generate all these other components. That creates space for the future. So I would say that would be another.
Okay, let's move on to the question number 2. So this question for Dr. Passaroy. So could you address the impact of the MMF on the review process from the Office of Bioequivalence, especially regarding when the second applicants reference the MMF in their review process?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. I think since I lead the review office in the bioequivalence within the generic drugs, I think some of the way I look at it is a more practical way, because a lot of the times the applications will have modeling component of it, whether to support an application or maybe, there is some lack of information which is, difficult to obtain. Many of the times, when we develop the generic products, there is no reference products in the marketplace, and that's a gap. And then we go through another reference standard, and sometimes there are some information which is sort of lacking. So I think from a modeling perspective, that will be able to bridge certain information, and that can be utilized very effectively in supporting an application. But oftentimes what happens is that we don't have a good understanding of the verification and the validation of the model. And then the question is, can we use the model? How much, confidence we have in the model, and be able to define the variability within the data. So if we have a model master file already sort of, I know it's not approved, not disapproved, but at least endorsed by the agency, and it's out there, then I can see the applicant essentially, utilizing that, and during the review process, then we don't get slowed down, and then we don't ask those type of questions. Then we can just focus on the application of the model in that particular application, whatever they're trying to solve. I think so from that practical aspect of it, it makes the review process much more efficient and more targeted, and hopefully, as I think Liang mentioned, if it's a benchmark, then we can sort of use that benchmark to actually make a regulatory decision making. So that's the way I think, I kind of view that.
Okay, well, let's go to the other question. Peck. Yeah.
Carl Peck, UCSF. I have two questions. One is, do you plan a formal qualification process before you make public a model that has been permitted to be used in the model master file? The second, is this turned on? Yeah. The second question, would you entertain using or accepting statistical models? So, TOAST, the two one-sided t-test, is a statistical model. It's a model in which the model is fit to the data that's presented under the assumption of normality. Most bioequivalence data submitted to the agency is too small in number to even test for normality, and often it's quite skewed, even it includes outliers. There are alternatives to the two one-sided t-test that preserve the sort of major distribution showing bioequivalence, but when you have an extreme outlier, you're in deep trouble. So the question is, will you entertain a statistical model like TOAST, but an alternative to TOAST in the model master file?
So Stella, do you want to start it? Sure.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I'm Stella Grosser, and I'm here to represent the statistics voice, if you like. I want to back up and say that the two one-sided tests approach is not what we're thinking of as a model per se. It's a way to do inference and make decisions about what we've seen and the models that are being used to explain the data. It's frequentist, and that's where the argument can come in, whether that's the best approach. There's, as I believe you mentioned, as Dr. Peck mentioned in his talk, there's been work on a Bayesian approach to decision-making, and certainly the center is entertaining that aspect of regulation in the way that CDRH has done for years. There's commitments within PDUFA for new drugs on issuing a guidance to Bayesian analysis. I can't really speak for OGD and where we are in that decision-making aspect. Outliers are a whole nother concern. And I would actually say that outliers are important for a couple of reasons. One is, as Don Sherman likes to say, what if it was your mother who has that unusual reaction to a drug? But the other thing that it does direct us to is the space of reactions to drugs and whether those whether the full range of human variability has been taken into account in our model building. And I think that's really important. I mean, I heard a mention of, Indian studies where it's primarily on men, and so you need to model the differences between men and women so that you can use these drugs on women, for example. But then there's a range beyond Indian. So what if, there's different genetic aspects between different groups across the world? And I'm thinking, for example, East Asians have a different enzymatic makeup, right? And so statins, for example, should be dosed at a much lower level. So all these things go into the aspects of model building, never mind the final decision-making using those models.
Thank you, Stella.
I think that's enough for me.
Yeah.
Yes, my name is Flora Musuamba, and I'm involved in several EMA-related group activities, but this is not the object of what I wanted to take the microphone for. But I like the question that was asked here related to the qualification or not of the model, because this is one of those I came with here, because I'm trying to build up a sort of parallelism between what we're doing at EMA for now and what the FDA colleagues are trying to set up here. And I know how tomorrow we'll talk about the fit for purpose. That one I start to grasp a little bit, because that is very close to the qualification but that we are doing at EMA. But this one you're putting on the table, and you're very creative. I'm very admirative of what FDA can come up with every year to sort of put emphasis on modeling. We are less good on that, to tell you the truth. We don't sell modeling enough as well as you're doing. But I see some value in what is being proposed here. The value that I see is like making the assessor aware of the previous exposure to the modeling. Even in an earlier version of it, at least we are not restarting the same thing from scratch each time we look at the model coming on our table. At EMA, we even have more struggle on that aspect than FDA, because, like, we're not all sitting in one office. So we have more of federation, more of work sharing from different countries, having different expertise, and the risk of inconsistency can be higher than what we could have in one room when someone can talk to his colleague. So consistency is key. Benchmarking is a concept that talks to me. But what I'm also seeing as a very big risk of all of this is how do you make sure that you're not creating also some sort of bias into the assessor's mind that, because this is argument that I see from applicant actually, you have already accepted this. Yes, and so what? The context of use has changed. The question is different. I have accepted it for adults. Now you're talking about children. It's not the same story. So at which point in time, this is what is not clear to me, and I need you guys to help here. At which point in time we are bringing in the story the difference into the context of use, the nuances in the new data, what has changed in the new application, because I'm sure if they come again referencing the same model, it's because they have another problem. So at which time exactly we take into account the nuances between the different applications, the differences into the question, the differences into the credibility, the risk-based analysis, and to sort of lead the assessment decision-making process. This is what is still to be clarified to me. Thanks.
Thank you, Flora. How you want to make a quick comment?
Very quickly, I think Dr. Peck, you raised a very great question is, what type of models we actually are considering from model master file mechanisms? Does that apply to statistic models? I just wanted to quickly mention, as Flora talked about it, we have, tomorrow we're going to talk about a fit for purpose program. I'm sure you're aware about it. That program is jointly working with our stats colleagues, Stella and others too. So we actually accepted some of the stats models in that pathway also for new drug development. Just wanted to mention this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Hao. I remember you want me to.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to make a quick comment. This occurs to me. There's a framework for pediatric extrapolation, and I'm wondering how much of that could be applied to more general use of models plus other evidence, and that's something to consider as a way of eventually using the master file for the models. And I was going to ask about fit for purpose, but so I'm glad you mentioned it. Yeah.
Stella, I think that definitely be something like a virtual population, something we probably can put under this framework. Yeah. So Erin, in your presentation, I really like the statement you mentioned. You said, okay, we do not approve drug master file. We actually only determine is adequate or not adequate for a certain intended purpose. I found that's highly relevant to the model master file. So I'm wondering that any inputs you may have tied to Dr. Peck's question, like how FDA like validate or qualify them before we actually post the quarterly list. Any thoughts from your end?
Yeah, so the quarterly DMF posting is not a listing of adequate or inadequate DMFs. It only lists the active DMFs and it doesn't have their status. As you might imagine, the status is highly dependent on what applications are referencing it. So from that regard, that would not be obvious from the list. For the verification and validation, that would be a review issue that is beyond the scope of my area of expertise.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So Bhagwant, you want to make comments since your office doing a lot of like biopharmaceutics modeling from that aspect?
Right. So I represent biopharmaceutics function at FDA, and typically the models that we see are PBPK models for biopharmaceutics applications, or PBBMs, or IVIVCs that can be just traditional empirical ones or mechanistic IVIVCs. Now, I guess the question is, I'll just go with analogy with DMF for generics. Typically, generic applicants buy reference DMFs, and the DMF holder authorizes FDA to review the information in the DMF. But they also provide the actual API to the applicants to put into their products. And along with it, potentially, I think they most likely give a specification sheet. So that's the output that goes from DMF holder to the applicant. And we also expect the applicant to do some work in terms of developing analytical methods for that API and developing their own specifications that we can assess in application. So question is, what is MMF holder giving to the applicant for the use in their applications? If the intention, if you consider PBPK model, you have drug factors, you have physiological factors, and you have formulation factors. So I think typical MMF could easily incorporate drug factors and physiological factors, but then formulation factors, that has to come from the applicant. So I think the applicant can either incorporate that into the MMF, the output that MMF folder has given to the applicant, the basic parameters, or potentially MMF folder could give a recipe to the applicant to determine what type of dissolution profile or dissolution method they can use to predict the outcomes, the bioequivalence outcomes. So I'm curious to see how this will evolve. We haven't seen this yet, so it's going to be interesting. But I think the basic MMF concept as a shareable concept, it would be highly useful, especially if the base model is already reviewed, validated, and accepted by FDA. We don't have to do that again, and then we just have to focus on the formulation factors to see whether it's valid for that particular application or not.
Okay, sure.
So talking in the similar context, very valid points raised. So one of the critical input that goes into the model is the biopredictive dissolution, which is often very different from the QC dissolution. And coming from the generic company, I know kind of efforts that we put in together from analytical formulation as well as biopharmaceutics towards the development of the biopredictive dissolution method. A lot of efforts goes into that. So whether the applicant is open to share those biopredictive dissolution conditions because of the enormous amount of efforts that has been put up in the development, that is one question. And secondly, what we have also observed is that despite having the same compound or similar formulation, the biopredictive method depends on a lot of other factors coming from the process perspective. So whether my biopredictive media can be able to distinguish the formulation as well as the in vivo behavior for the other applicants is something that we need to consider. So all these things will definitely play a very big role in the biopredictivity and establishing the credibility of the PBBM. And these are some of the factors that we need to consider while we implement the concept of MMF and sharing across the different applicants. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Since already 11:05, so we're going to our last question from audience. Maybe Andy, yeah.
Pratik Saha, GlaxoSmithKline. So obviously heard quite a few good examples of the MMF concepts. I'm actually going to reflect back on Liang Zhao's summary slide. You raised a bunch of questions, and one of those was how to mitigate unintended consequences. So maybe open up to the panel, what are those unintended consequences? And are there any, do you foresee any hurdles, or on the flip side, any pitfalls of, so we heard a lot of positives, but maybe comment on the unintended consequences.
Liang, do you want to start it?
Yeah, I can kick off that discussion. Actually, I want to ask the audience back, in your opinion, what would be the unintended consequences? I think I see many hands raised up. I know you all have good questions. We will get, certainly, the breakout sessions designed to hear everyone's voice. What is your understanding of the model master file? So that's how we build the program. In the whole afternoon, then almost in the whole afternoon, we are going to hear all of your voices. So we heard some feedback before the workshop over the past 3 or 4 years about people worrying about, for example, will my, say if I'm a consultant, I develop a PBPK platform. I spent so much effort in terms of collecting the physiological parameters, making everything work, validate my platform. We've done all of this. If I don't want to release my information, but if applicants want to use your consulting service, what if they ask you to disclose all the parameters? That could be not unintended, kind of things in the play that you want to address. I think a model master file, instead of have unintended consequences, will address that. Say in the future, if Elon Musk He want to develop a PBPK model. Then he developed a X platform for oral inhalation, for example. Then, or for thermal. So then we have SimSip, right? Already have a platform that's been used. FDA won't again review all the physiological parameters, equations behind Sim platform. But for Elon Musk's new platform, we need to launch effort to validate everything. Then once for all, after that, then the model master file will address the issue, the previous reviewers comment, every effort will record it, then that platform will be kind of accepted for future use. Then that kind of reduce the effort for the next reviewer, for the company, for the next application. For those things, I think model master file will address. So we receive feedback, but I think the model master file could be, as Erin presented, could address all of the potential questions, like if there's a model master file ready to address regulatory need, will that block other master file development? No, So I think we exhausted our thinking. So I'm posing the question back to you. What do you see as a stakeholder? There's something will negatively affect you. Then we'll build in the program, how to set up mechanism to address your concern. That's the purpose of the workshop. One of the major purposes of the workshop.
Yeah, can I make a couple of comments on that one? I think the answer is we do not know how the marketplace is going to plan out. And that's why I think, we need input from everybody, and we want to hear that. And whether it's going to be identical to the DMF, my sense is probably not. It will have its own path, and whether sharing information from applicant to a consulting firm and going and back and forth, I think we need to see how that plays out. I also wanted to propose that, and I don't think anybody has talked about it, is a bioanalytical method development, which is not in a master file concept, but that's also a lot of times we have seen companies go to a certain CROs to get their method, off-the-shelf method and use that for the drug analysis. I mean, again, no, I don't think we are talking about all the simple methods here to be incorporated in the master file, but I think only the future will tell how this could be utilized. Thank you.
I can make a quick comment there. When it comes to the model master file and unintended consequences, one of my concerns would be, what are the assumptions being brought in? So if we have a very complex model in which some of the equations, they were not well solvable at the time. So assumptions were brought in to adjust that model. These are not explicitly stated. It's not publicly available. It's not known. The unintended consequences may not be known for that one context of use. And so we can say, oh, this is a great model master file, but we don't know what those unintended consequences will be because we don't know what those assumptions are. We don't know what those equations are. We don't have an external sort of validation of those pieces. That would be my concern there. So I like putting things out in the literature or putting things out in the area where other scientists can critically assess that and say, this assumption I agree with and it can work for my context of use, or this assumption is going to be problematic. We need to build on that assumption. But that would be a concern that I would have of not bringing that forward, or maybe there might be a way to bring that forward, protecting the IP, but being able to bring forward, here are some assumptions that would need to be addressed within that model.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the, go ahead.
No, but if...
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I don't know, to be sure. That's my problem. No, I just wanted to say that I like a lot the comment that was made here related to assumptions, because there is a sort of extrapolation component in everything that is being mentioned here. And it is sort of assumed that one understands all the components of the model and is very clear on what can be applicable for one to another drug development program. And to be honest, it's not always the case. And there's a risk there that we take for granted something that is actually, sort of contaminated by some sort of uncertainty, and that will pop up in all the different new applications. So this is also something to have closely in eye on.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for all the comments and questions. I know they have a lot of questions we haven't chance to go through, so please save your question for this afternoon, the roundtable. Thank you. Thank you.